5 of our presenters so that as we go through the day, we can move very quickly because we have 8 minutes and then we want to get some Q&A in. And so, Sven, if you could you introduce your family?
Yeah, good morning. I'm the strange guy with the monocle, which is glasses. Second presentation with that, it's really strange. It's my pleasure, good morning everybody, to introduce Kristen from University of Michigan Press, who has been working with us, and Colleen Temple from the Max Planck Digital Library.
Thank you so much. And also we have presenting, our second presentation will be Ms. Alice Doherty from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. And we have my dear friend, Mrs. Stephen Brendan Tutt of Coherent Digital. And we have a substitution, Ms. Enid Wolstein is here from the Kentucky Virtual Library. And last but not least, Ms. Betty Legassi from NISO. Without further ado, I'm going to present Sven and the Family Stone.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I didn't want to come alone. I'm always a little afraid in front of so many people, so I brought support. Thank you for being here. We would like to talk about finding solutions to inequity in open access publishing, or in publishing as a whole. And we wanted to present the first package that we are doing at Knowledge Unleashed, which is called Open Opportunities for that. And we are combo here, a family, as you say, Burrell, because we wanted to bring the different perspectives, which is probably more credible, me not talking about libraries and publishers in this context. So what is the challenge to publishing from a KU perspective? Why did we start this whole conversation? Then what is the publisher's response, in this case Michigan's, and what does the librarian think about it? What we wanted to bring is really tangible equity to underserved communities in line with sustainable development goals, but also others, to KU packages. And we are not just doing that because we are nice people, but we are doing it because we know that it's really important to our constituency in libraries and other places. So we are working on mission-driven products, focused collections, for example, on climate change, on global health, but also a lot in Africa with TCC Africa, a great organization over there. A few publisher partners started contemplating about DE&I and what it really means to a product, a ebook package in our case, an open access ebook package. And we wanted to really eliminate the barriers to research that we see, not just on the reading side, but also look more into the publishing side and the equity that we can create there. And we were really happy to find our friends from Michigan, who within, I guess, 8 weeks, helped us to put this package together. With that, I'm handing over to Kristen. Thanks.
Yeah, so hello. Like Sven said, we were really excited to jump in and experiment with KU to see what might be possible. Michigan, as you might know, is really interested in finding as many ways as possible to bring open into the world. And so with this Open Opportunities program, we really wanted to experiment with that. So we viewed open opportunities in a couple of different ways. Primarily, we think equity in OA publishing, it is a multidimensional issue. This is something where you have to look at all of the facets of DEIA. So for open opportunities, we worked with KU to figure out what the best way to make that possible and actionable would be. And one standard that we decided to set up was that at least 30% of the scholars and books participating in the program would be coming from researchers who would not necessarily be tenure track, wouldn't necessarily be the people that you would expect to have access to funds. Contingent faculty, independent or unaffiliated scholars, early career researchers like PhD candidates who do great work but don't have access to funding. And we said, yeah, we really want to take this on a test run. So, like Sven said, this happened real quick. How did we actually pick which books would participate? First off, quality of title. We never want any of our open access title or any knowledge in programs like KU to be of different quality than anything else we publish. They go through the same peer review process. They're just as grand and brilliant as all of the others. But we also wanted it to fit the subject area and theme of this year. And this year is about peace and about finding a way to bring the world together. And as we know, this year in particular could use that. And so we also looked at To what extent the books would have an impact on the public good? Why was it important that these specific books were open access? How would the world benefit from that? And then we look into author circumstances, so thinking about are they PhD candidates, contingent, etc. Because that does feed into lack of other funding opportunities. And I do want to say, we ask every author before we just stick them in a program like this to say, are they open to it? Are they interested? And we got a ton of really great feedback from our authors who say, we really would not have been able to publish open if we were required to pay a subvention or a book processing charge. It just isn't possible. Our university doesn't give us that funding, especially in the case of this example, this is an edited volume. Edited volumes have a lot harder time, at least in the humanities and social sciences, of getting funding than single title or single author monographs. And so with something like Michigan and KU, this helps bring together the possibility for these books that do make a difference in the world and that wouldn't necessarily otherwise be able to be out there without some sort of external support. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Colleen, who will talk about how that support actually gets here and what that means.
Yeah, I just have a very quick comments on why libraries should pledge for this collection. I mean, I think the first is quite obvious. It's quality content, and when we know, I mean, Michigan University Press makes good work and that KU creates good collections, so that's a no-brainer. The topic is obviously a very critical topic, specifically in the context of DEI, so that works as well. Open access, of course, is the key to greater equity in scholarly publishing, scholarly communication, and research. And then finally, it's a way for libraries. I think that diversity, equity, inclusion are themes that are extremely important to libraries. And we need to think about the many, many ways that we can support that. And one of these is actually supporting open access for those authors that might not have opportunities to publish openly otherwise. So I think this is a fantastic collection, and we're very happy to support it.
Was that 10 minutes?
Oh, that was fantastic. Let's give a round of applause. Wow. Sven, thank you so much. Very interesting. And we'll have questions at the end. We have plenty of time for questions. All right. And without further ado, Miss Alice Doherty from University of Alabama.
Thank you. Let's get out here.
All right. I like to time myself, so I brought my timer.
No worries.
Good morning, everyone. As already addressed, I'm Alice Daugherty. I'm the Director of Resource Acquisition and Discovery at the University of Alabama. I'm going to talk to you today about 3 product implementations that my unit did this last year. As a brief introduction, University of Alabama is a flagship university with about 38,000 FTE. For undergraduate, we are very high research activity, so in R1, there's a little over 5 million volumes of books in our collection and about 650 databases. We have 12 different schools that we serve, and within my unit, Resource Acquisition and Discovery, we are solutions-driven, rapidly evolving, so we now have just cataloging metadata, archival metadata, government documents processing, scholarly communications, acquisitions, e-resources, systems, and technical processing. So it's a highly evolving unit, solutions-driven. We are also concerned about workflow efficiencies all across the board. We want to make sure that staff are well-trained and there are no single points of failure, and that we continually monitor if we can get things done easier by using technology. We're also very concerned about collaboration and communication across all the units within university libraries. That being said, some of the goals of this project was to enhance access and discovery of materials, to promote and increase visibility of interlibrary loan services, and to meet goals and objectives of our new strategic plan that started again in 2022. So it's not brand new in the sense that we didn't have one before. We closed that one out and rebuilt a new one to vision for the future. One of the goals of the strategic plan is access to comprehensive scholarly information resources that support campus curricula and contribute to the impact of the research life cycle. So some of the things that I talk about here briefly is a buy versus borrow philosophy. The library community already understands that no library can own everything. So library administration or librarians must find strategic paths to be able to have a sustainable balance of the things that we buy, subscribe to, borrow. We'll go to the next one just for time. We also understand that in a lot of places we wanted to develop with our discovery layers a decade ago, kind of a one-stop shop model, and that does now include open access content. However, if you work in a discovery layer on the back end or in the weeds, as they say, you can tell that sometimes there's difficulty in reconciling access to open access content with paid for content within a discovery layer or with open URLs. This happens because of incomplete metadata and also some link rot. So sometimes the things aren't quite accessible. Also, you're reconciling the fact that you want to provide access to all users, but not all your users can authenticate into your discovery layer or your systems. So how do you try to prevent those barriers and provide broader ranges of access to open access content and other content? So we decided that these three tools are unique implementations, and I'm just going to run through them really quickly, if you'll allow me. So Lean Library, it's a browser extension that you download on your laptop, and it basically provides you a pathway to your already subscribed to or purchased content. So users can be off campus, and this widget will pop up, and it will say, hey, we can put this article in your inbox. We can deliver this article to you right now. Lean Library also offers pathways to open access content, and they also will allow you to link things in through ILLiad. So if you want to go to Library Alone. We at Alabama subscribe to the Lean Library's workflow for LibGuides, which is their intermediate tier product. For each tier, you get more customization in the product. One of the things that they designed for us was this splash page that we keep up on our A to Z that tells users how to download the widget or the browser extension, whichever way you want to look at it. And it also offers assist message features to direct users to locations where your content is available. For example, for us, if you go to Tuscaloosa News, you will get a direct assist message that shows you how to get to Tuscaloosa News through NewsBank. The same can be said for something like the New York Times. So often if they're on the regular interwebs, we'll direct them back to ProQuest content or other content. Same with the student newspaper. If they want access to the Crimson White. You can create and customize these messages for your own, and we find them to be rather relevant for lots of things. Because we subscribe to the one with LibGuides, you can also direct them to library liaisons. So it's quite a versatile tool. It integrates with SpringShare's LibChat, so they can gain access to chat features from their home computer when they're off campus or not logged in. And it also has Zotero integrations for citation management. I don't want to seem like I'm a sales pitch person for this. Really, we were just trying to open up access and content for all of our students in multiple pathways. So next, we have a complementary tool, Article Galaxy Scholar. Some of you might be familiar with reprints. So we implemented Article Galaxy Scholar. We built it to where it would land in our menu page of our full text finder menu within our discovery layer. What happens is we strategically targeted content to which we do not have large big deal packages, right? So particularly, this was for Taylor and Francis. We do not have a big deal package with Taylor and Francis, but in order to gain access to some of that journal content that is highly used in the social sciences and education, we implemented where they can get per article access, and we pay behind the scenes a minimum charge for each article that they need. So they get desktop delivery of their article. really comes in email, but you guys get the drift. Desktop delivery of their article in a just-in-time manner, and we just pay a small fee behind the scenes. So Article Galaxy Scholar has 30,000 different titles of non-embargoed content. Our next endeavor at the University of Alabama is to use it with some of the high-cost journal titles like Springer Nature, where we also do not have a large, I mean, we have Springer, of course, but Springer Nature gets a little trickier. And for journals that cost over $10,000 to $12,000 per title, it's much easier to think of allowing access to key faculty, those high-end users, to specific titles through Article Galaxy Scholar. It's really just a phenomenal tool. To go back to what I was saying about open access being a little hard to reconcile in the discovery layer, both Lean Library and Article Galaxy Scholar deliver open access as well. So they search for that content and they provide it if it's available first. Article Galaxy Scholar also follows up with ILLiad. I have like 15 seconds left, so let me get to the last one really quick. We developed something that I call the one button, and basically this mirrors an interlibrary loan form that used to be in our ILS, but that coding was a long time ago, so we implemented it into our discovery layer. You can see it in the record here where it says request item. So thank you all very much. Sorry that I ran long.
Not at all. You're fine. I actually gave you 10 extra seconds.
I
so.
saw that. I saw that.
No
Thank
worries,
you.
no worries. All right, my good friend, Mr. Tutt from Coherent Digital.
I can't tell you what the time pressure is like up here. It's really, really intense. All right. So, Daryl, it won't start right. The clock doesn't start till I actually have my presentation up. All right. There we go. Great. I'm Stephen Rintutt from Coherent Digital, and I'm here today to talk about a couple of projects that we're working on. Let's start with the challenge. This is a map of archives around the world. And what you can see really, really clearly is thousands of archives documented in North America, hundreds in Europe, 3 in Africa, and almost none in South Asia. That's really frightening when one looks at that. This is visually representing exactly what's missing in our cumulative knowledge. And the reasons behind this I've put in brown. And you can see that the challenge is just enormous. Many, many archives are hidden. There's no finding aids. The guides are hard to find. The materials are at risk. It's not just as well in physical archives. We did an audit of materials on the internet. There are millions of great items, many of which are hosted by your institutions. But collectively, they're really, really hard to find. And they're very difficult for people outside of the West to actually find. So if you imagine that you're in Africa and you have a mobile phone and English isn't your first language, many, many of these artifacts are not mobile friendly and they're not available in local language UIs. So we came up with a system, and this is where the innovation comes. We recognize that there are a number of tools out there to assist us with the process of actually improving things. First of all, capture tools, because we know that if we're to address this challenge, the cost to capture and the speed with which we capture has to be changed radically. Why can't we use mobile phones to actually capture some of this material? Secondly, having captured it and actually got physical copies, digital copies, pardon me, we have to figure out better ways of enriching. Last I looked, the cheapest MARC record costs $1. The most expensive costs $10. There are millions of items. If we don't get that cost down, we're not going to be able to do it. So we figured out some AI tools. Now, I'd love to pretend to you that our developers have got a super sexy AI system. We don't. We use tools out of Google, out of Amazon. We use tools that many of you have actually developed. What I noticed, though, is that these tools are not coherent. They're fundamentally for different purposes, and they don't work together. Hence the name of the company, Coherent Digital. Our idea was not to reinvent the wheel, simply to make what's already out there coherent. If we're going to use AI tools to index, what one notices quite quickly is that the dissemination tools have also to be fault tolerant. So what I mean by that is many systems require a nicely formed MARC record or a nicely formed author record in order to be able to present a decent UI. So we developed a UI that's fault tolerant. Lastly, we have to make sure that this material is generally accessible. So we developed a business model that's freemium, so we allow access to the entire database for free to a certain level. So the products that we've actually built out of these are twofold. One is an archive of South Asia. The second is one, Africa Commons. And what I wanted to do here was just talk in a little bit about some of the innovations that I hope you agree we've achieved. The first thing is a link architecture. Now, I know DPLA and Europeana and others use links, but it's really, really important here because many of our partners do not want us stealing web traffic from their websites. Many systems require you to ingest the content in order to be able to perform operations on it. That's not pleasant if you depend on web traffic to justify your existence. So instead, we built the system so it links out to the original sites. When you use Africa Commons, you're actually typically going to a site that we don't control. All we've done is add indexing to it. Second thing, the quality of the content. We found absolutely amazing content out there that's really, really hard to find. Apologies to some of you who may have heard this example at another presentation I did earlier. The Mighty Man comic done by UCLA is the first born African superhero. And you see he is the human law enforcing dynamo. This is from the early 70s. The kicker is that this magazine was actually done by the South African apartheid government. So Mighty Man is actually championing apartheid justice. At UCLA, they've actually written an essay around this. Who would find this? We spoke with South African librarians, and many of them didn't know about it. Let's talk about enrichment. Our AI tools actually enable us to build, they automatically extract title, they look for author, they will auto-generate a summary. So the net result is that we've actually been able to reduce the overall down to pennies for actually getting the content in. Now, there's a little challenge here because AIs are not perfect, so there's a little bit of dirt in the database. But what we noticed then was that with our systems, we can actually improve the cataloging records over time. So that way we can both give access to the content as well as making sure that over time the indexing gets better and better. Preservation. Many, many wonderful websites flourish with funding. It's like a flower. They bloom, they're beautiful, everybody loves them. And then when summer is over and the funding ceases, they fade and wither and disappear. This is actually from a LibGuide of a major US institution. We went through and looked at the links pertaining to Africa. Unbelievably, almost half of the links had actually got eroded. And you're like, oh, well, so you get a 404? No, you don't. These sites on the left are what you actually get. African Music Profiles, a really nice biographical database, has now become a Japanese dating website. The Bank of Sierra Leone is now advocating that you invest in marijuana stocks. There are some where you actually have no clue at all what's actually going on because it's in Vietnamese or a different language. Jenny Chu was a Peace Corps a volunteer who photographed her time in Africa. It's a common name. I don't know where she is. I can see a little bit from the Internet Archive of what used to be there, but the Internet Archive doesn't go deep enough. So those photographs are gone. Uploads and links. We developed a tool so you can upload directly into the database. So with that, what that means then is, in this case, the National Free Library of Zimbabwe is actually able to submit content that we can then enable them for free to disseminate to the world. And because the architecture was built coherently, we can do that in less than a minute. Lastly, organizational controls. If you take, say, South Asia as an example, piracy is rampant in this space. Many, many people copying individual sections of books and then presenting them as if they were their own. Printers claiming that they're publishers. So I can see I'm at my end here. I think I'm at 8:20. Yep, time to stop. Thank you so much.
Brilliant presentation, thank you. Next, we have Ms. Zinad Wolstein from the Kentucky Virtual Library.
Good morning. So Kentucky Virtual Library is housed at the Council on Post-Secondary Education in Kentucky, and we are a 350-member multi-type consortium. About a third of that is school districts. It includes public libraries, universities, colleges, and others. We offer over 65 research databases and skills building resources, and those are accessible to every member. So we don't segregate by library type. Alona couldn't be here today, so I have a video to share. And in the video, there is a link to a LibGuide where we have instructions and resources to talk about EasyProxy and how we use it for authentication. And I'll be here for questions after. Why don't I have sound?
The volume is up.
Yeah. It played fine last night and this morning. Well, maybe not. This one?
Resources
Okay.
using their school
Apologies.
email
Thank
address.
you all.
Welcome to today's innovation session, From What If to That Was Easy, leveraging Auth Equals and EasyProxy to take SAML authentication to scale. My name is Alona Burdett. I'm Executive Director of the Kentucky Virtual Library, and my colleague and co-author is KYVL Senior Fellow Enid Wolstein. We're a staff of 2 within the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education. Thank you for joining us. We'll share today how KYVL has leveraged EasyProxy's capacity to configure multiple authentication servers to scale SAML authentication for Kentucky school districts and other member institutions. To date, we've configured over 80 authentication servers that make it possible for 450,000 Kentucky students to log into KYVL resources using their school email address. With no access to Google or Azure AD admin consoles, KYVL remains stuck on What If until the right collaborators helped put us on the road to That Was Easy. We gratefully acknowledge the IT teams that brought us along as they captured screenshots and documented procedures, and we're delighted to pass along both step-by-step procedures for EasyProxy admins and step-by-step tutorials for the IT staffs we partner with. Today's session will be broken into 3 quick parts: the KYVL login form and its JavaScript, your EasyProxy metadata and tutorials to share with IT partners, and how to configure EasyProxy once partner metadata is received. We'll cover a lot of ground quickly, but never fear. All these resources and more can be found at kyvl.org/easyproxy. Upcoming slides will include more targeted links, but everything we'll share is easily accessible from drop-down menus or simply by scrolling from the main link. Let's begin with a demo of our SAML login process through the KYVL login form. The user has clicked on a proxy link for Britannica School, taking them to KYVL's EasyProxy login page. The user enters their school email address. For configured districts, JavaScript presents a button directing them to log in using their school email. They're sent to a Google login screen where they again enter their email address. About a dozen of our districts redirect users to a Microsoft login. Upon entering their password, they are authenticated to the original Britannica link. Most of our districts using Google or Microsoft only, but this example demonstrates seamless transfer from Google to Azure AD.
Okay, so there's a 10-second pause here. But I will tell you that we have school districts using this as well as private universities and some private schools.
The JavaScript on the login page parses the user's email address to see if their email domain is configured for SAML authentication with KYVL. If so, it assigns an auth value based on the user's email address. This enables EasyProxy to direct the user to the correct authentication server without user intervention. This is key to avoiding the delays that can arise with multiple authentication servers, as described in EasyProxy support docs. The auth value will be used again when configuring user.txt. The resources section of KYVL's EasyProxy page includes links to HTML and JavaScript that you can use as models. Next up, your metadata and other resources to share with your IT partners. EasyProxy metadata can be found in EasyProxy admin under Manage SSL Certificates. If needed, create or import your SSL certificate here. To find the metadata values you will need, click the number of the certificate you will use for your SAML connections. On the next screen, select one of the View Shibboleth Metadata for this certificate options. While viewing your certificate, make note of two metadata values, the entity descriptor entity ID and the assertion consumer service location post value. The first is found near the top of the file, the second near the bottom. These values will be needed by your IT partners when configuring Azure AD or Google for SAML login. Metadata for both service providers and identity providers contain entity IDs. For current purposes, EasyProxy is the service provider, and Google and Azure AD are IDPs. Step-by-step tutorials for both Google and Azure AD configuration are available in the resources section. Be sure to substitute your EasyProxy metadata values for the KYVL values in the tutorials when sharing with your IT partners. In the course of completing either tutorial, local IT admins will send EasyProxy admins an XML file or a link to XML metadata. They'll also be asked for test user login credentials, which we'll need later. EasyProxy admins will use the entity IDs in EasyProxy's user.txt file during SAML configuration. KYVL logs entity IDs in a spreadsheet of key data points for each SAML instance we configure. A spreadsheet template is included among the KYVL sample documents in the resources section at the end of the guide. Finally, let's take a look at the edits made under the hood each time a new SAML connection is made. Once the IDP's metadata is received and logged, it's time to configure EasyProxy. The process is simple and can be completed in about 5 minutes, and there's no limit to the number of authentication servers you can add. KYVL currently has over 80 configured. To configure a new authentication server, you'll simply upload the IDP's metadata file to the server and make minor cut and paste edits to user.txt, config.txt, and the login form JavaScript. And, no surprise, restart EasyProxy. If that sounds easy, it is. If a local IT partner provides the proper metadata and has made the necessary configurations on their admin side, we can have a new server configured, up and running in under 5 minutes. Just a note that KYVL uses Notepad++ to edit all the files listed on this slide. A download link can be found in the resources section. Detailed instructions for each step can be found in the config portion of the guide. Here's a quick run-through of KYVL's process. When uploading metadata, KYVL renames each metadata file auth.xml, where auth matches the auth value assigned by the JavaScript on the login page, generally the district name from a user's email. KYVL created a folder called include shib in the main EasyProxy directory as the destination folder for all XML files. The combined path and file name for each metadata file, for example, include shib/mydistrict.xml, will be used in a shibboleth metadata directive in config.txt. Shibboleth in user.txt is configured between these bookends. Add the conditional if login auth equals statement for your new IDP, where auth matches the auth value assigned by the login page JavaScript. And here's where you include the entity ID you received in your IDP's metadata file. Google and Azure AD entity IDs have different formats. You can view both on the guide. Each KYVL shibboleth directive has this format. Note the entity ID from our EasyProxy metadata and the path to the file name in the include shib folder. The remaining information uses the defaults from OCLC's EasyProxy documentation. For each new identity provider, we simply cut and paste, editing only the file name. EasyProxy restart is required for edits to config.txt to take effect, but this can be postponed briefly while we edit login.js. So on to our last edit. The newly configured district needs to be added to the list of configured districts in loginform.js, or as in KYVL's case, loginformallsaml.js. Public school districts and other IDPs are handled differently by the JavaScript, so KYVL's JavaScript maintains separate alphabetized lists. Use caution when editing. The code is unforgiving. A misplaced comma or quotation mark can break the whole thing. Save changes and restart EasyProxy. And with that, you're ready for testing with the credentials provided earlier by your IDP. Although errors can arise, we found that having local IT admins go back through the appropriate Google or Azure AD tutorial solves nearly all problems. Of course, there are also occasional cut and paste errors on our part. Thank you for allowing us to share what has been a major improvement to the user experience for Kentucky's K-12 students. We look forward to hearing from you with your questions and successes.
All right, let's give Enid a round of applause. Last but certainly not least, Ms. Nettie Lagasse from NISO.
Wonderful.
Nettie?
Thank you, Darrell.
Absolutely.
All right, let's see. Escape. There we go. Right. All right, thanks everyone. My name is Nettie Lagasse. I'm the Associate Executive Director at NISO, and today I want to talk to you about just one of our projects. Its acronym is CPLD, that stands for Content Platform Linked Document, and it's a working group that's underway with a draft standard to be out this fall. I had hoped that it would be out by the time of Charleston, but when you submit a proposal in July, you never quite know. NISO is the National Information Standards Organization, and yes, we have national in our name, but we are really quite international with the advent of digital information and publishing. There's no limit to borders, and many of our participants are people from all over the world, which is very interesting and enriches our work. We, of course, create, publish, and maintain standards and recommended practices. We foster the adoption of those standards. Standard doesn't do anything if it sits on a shelf and nobody's using it. So it's important to keep it up to date, including educating the community on related issues and also incubating thought leadership activities. One of those is our annual NISO Plus conference. It's a virtual conference that takes place in February and is very heavy on discussion and input, and very interesting and exciting. One important aspect of NISO is we are a volunteer-driven organization. All the work of all of our standards is done by volunteers like you, people from libraries, technology companies, publishers, system providers, consultants, coming together to work and represent viewpoints so that our standards are as practical and adoptable as possible. Because as I said, standard doesn't do any good if it sits on a shelf and nobody's using it. So we want it to be used. Standards provide interconnectivity, and that's a major aspect of the work I'm going to be talking about today. So content is in demand. As you know, everyone wants content. Users expect bite-sized pieces. Think of a Google experience where you type something into Google and Google responds with elements of information that answer your question, help you to move forward. And users are expecting that everywhere, so that content is machine actionable and that it links with other things and can create relationships. However, the content from scholarly work is often difficult to consume, partly due to the publishing standards that are excellent but are rather inflexible. Document models developed through strong governance structures, much like NISO governance, and we are still stuck in print workflows. So where journal articles have been published in print for the last 40, 50 years, that workflow from the publisher side is continuing to dominate. The purpose of our initiative is to look at emphasize meaning rather than structure and improve relationships between entities. So that's the linked document piece of it. The working group, I'm very proud to say, has many excellent representatives, including librarians, publishing companies, platform companies, and everyone very knowledgeable about metadata and publishing processes. It is based on standards. It's based mainly on HTML and linked data, so to make it as adoptable as possible using tools that are already there. The content is captured using HTML5 or XHTML and then utilizes JSON-LD to describe the data about the content. This standard is not examining search optimization or platform functions. Of course, those are needed. Once you have content that is organized in a particular way to be actionable, you need the platform to adopt that, but that's out of scope for this initial effort. And it is also not intended to replace existing models where publishers use JATS or are publishing an EPUB. This is not meant to be a scale replacement for those. I'm moving along in time, and I am obviously not a technologist, so I just want to very quickly highlight that there's mainly two parts to the standard: a set of rules that outline minimum characteristics of documents, these are linked documents, and then a number of content profiles that can refine these rules. And an important element of this upcoming standard is the stratification. So where you have an article online and you think about the structure of that article with a title, an abstract, an introduction, that's obviously a very linear structure that we're all used to when we publish journal articles, but how can we pop out of that and use the information that's in those articles in different way? That's a semantic structure. So information then is taken from the semantics to create data, datify articles that then can be used in other places. So where you have text and structure, narrative and semantics, that same model, we can structure that in HTML5 for the content and use JSON-LD for the structure and then connections. When this document is made available for public comment this year, the working group is working very hard in finalizing the draft to make it available for public comment by NISO, and we were hoping, as I said, to have it available by this time, and we've been delayed a bit. It will also come along with a GitHub repository for schemas, for also a document viewer, so you can check on samples and kind of road test some content that if you are interested in creating it and you have the capabilities, there are tools to help you examine that and kind of see how it's working. An important part of these standards is often when they're technical and they require resources to implement, that of course impedes adoption. So we're trying to make as much available for users, potential adopters to understand in their own context how these tools might work for them. And ultimately, really wanting to support more flexible design and rely on usage and feedback to change how something is published and become more iterative in a development cycle, make it more easily analyzed and enriched as other content becomes available, work across publishers, so publishers would be able to share content, or libraries or other entities would be able to combine content from various publishers and ultimately make it easier to discover and reuse. There's a public comment period later this year. If you go to niso.org, you can sign up for our announcements on that. And I'm also available on Twitter and obviously email. So happy to get questions anytime. That's it for me.
Okay. Sven, if you and your colleagues can just come up here, because we're going to have a great Q&A period. I'd like to kick it off with to see if someone from the audience has a burning question that they would like to ask our panel. We have 2 microphones, one to the left, one to my right. Any questions? Because I have a ton of them. Okay, so let's start off with our first presenters, the family Sven and the family Stone. So, what is the critical path for a library to get involved with your project? What are the key steps? And please step up if you like.
Well, I guess first of all, to start with the publisher, if I may, and I guess that's the most important point about our presentation today. It's not here to sell anything into libraries, but the point is publishers need to get tangible, I think, about everything that has to do with DE&I and their programs. That's our concern, and that's why we wanted to talk to you here today. I think for libraries it's really easy. I think it's important in collection building, in decisions about open access, to really make sure that DE&I becomes a place in this decision making, and that we develop together. I don't want to call it standards after NISO, that always sounds a little bit weird, but practices, how we can do this and what's really important and how we can build it into collection building and how not. That's at least my perspective.
Any, your colleagues, anything you'd like to add?
Just very briefly, that KU is really flexible from the publisher side of what you put in, and if you have concerns about particular naming conventions or DEI, they've been very responsive. So I guess I just want to throw out there that equity, inclusion, justice, these are all things that we have to work on together, and I think this is one way to do that, but we all have to buy in.
All right. For my colleague from Alabama, Roll Tide. I'm a Penn State person myself, but so how does a fellow library partner with the University of Alabama? You got a lot of great tools there.
A fellow library?
Another library, if they want to leverage your technology.
Okay, well, I would probably say that the technology isn't ours, right? So it's proprietary. You subscribe through Lean Library or you subscribe through Article Galaxy, Scholar. Some of the technical implementations of the one button were just the techno magic that the team can work in EBSCO admin. So probably I would think because we brought those products in to also increase the visibility of interlibrary loan, that maybe through interlibrary loan and sharing would be an option. Perhaps brainstorming new technologies for future development on how we can serve access and discovery for campus users. We have a lot of great innovation going on there.
Okay. One thing I want to follow up on, you had mentioned about Springer Nature in particular titles that are somewhat expensive, and you want to give your power users access to it through Article Galaxy. What does Article Galaxy do beyond just the normal go on the Springer site and pay the $30 for the copyright?
That's great. So the fee is actually paid through the library, and the user has no idea that we're paying it behind the scene, similar to other subscriptions where they think the content comes from free. We make it easily accessible through Article Galaxy Scholar, and we deliver it for items that go beyond the local collections, right? So the discovery layer is enhanced to only deliver local collection content, and when they come upon other items like nature energy or other specific nature titles, and there are multiple, they'll have that content delivered to them. I think it's within an hour, if even. Sometimes the link comes right up and says the PDF is in your email box. So that empowers our users to broaden their research, which is a high priority of the university now that we are in R1, which is a fairly recent development within the last 5 years.
Okay. I see we got a line here, so is there a question? Please, step up.
My question is for Mr. Reintutt, I think.
Reintutt, all right.
Did I get it right? Okay, my name is Christine Dunleavy. I'm from the University of South Florida in St. Petersburg, and I was wondering what extent would, what would your freemium product offer me? Would I be able to build a little database, test and see, look at my metadata, look at what AI is offering? And if it would provide that, how would I be able to get information on how to get access to a freemium copy of your database? I just think it's brilliant.
Thank you so much. It's complicated. So the simple part, right, is Africa Commons is currently in beta, and it will actually launch shortly. And anybody in this room is welcome to register africacommons.net, and you will immediately get access to the database when it launches. The upload tool is openly available as well, so you can do those things. The AIs are much harder, and we're thinking about how we might enable those AIs to be useful more broadly. But the truth is, a lot of them are openly available, and if you have development resources, you can get access to them. So at some stage then, Africa and South Asia Commons will make all the materials available. A year, maybe, we'll be in a position to say, okay, you have bulk loads of content that you want to upload and create a database yourself. It's in the future, I would say.
Yes, sir. We have another question here.
Yes, so my question or my comment is regarding the Kentucky Virtual Library. I mean, I could easily see that working in a resource sharing environment where, you know, maybe you want to do ILL for books or digitized material that way, or even maybe if there's a way to configure specific users, for example, alumni users, where license agreements allow, but only to alumni, of course, right, who don't have valid institutional credentials, we could configure it for specific alumni users.
Well, with Kentucky Virtual Library, anybody in the state of Kentucky can go to their public library and do interlibrary loan and have access to these resources. We don't interfere with the institutions and their users.
No, I was thinking about using the authentication at scale, you know, in a resource sharing environment, like, you know, using what, you know, as an example.
Yeah,
as
I
an
get
example.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for broader application.
Yeah. You know, like taking what you did and maybe creating a repository of digitized content that could only, you know, it's restricted for use, and yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
I did have a follow-up question for Mr. Tutt. So why is the curation and archiving for content from Africa important?
That's a great question. So I think it's money, fundamentally, but it's also standards that we develop in the West. So I've engaged with many, many African librarians, and things like EAD, the Encoded Archival Descriptor, is very common here, but it's also quite expensive to create. And so that old cliche, the enemy of the good, the perfect's the enemy of the good. So a lot of Word documents that actually outline an archive quite well, there's no easy mechanism for those to get out. And so by saying, oh, we need this to be properly shaped and we need this to actually conform to a standard, of course we want that, but that's expensive. And there's an earlier step we can take. The faculty we've talked to are like, look, I just want to find out what's in the archive. Really, it would be wonderful if I could do, you know, a Boolean search on field 1 and field 7 and isolate exactly what I'm looking for. But actually, the plain vanilla thing would be simply to know that so-and-so's archive's actually available at this place.
You know, the Charleston Conference serves such an important purpose, as does the Society of Scholarly Publishers annual meeting, where folks gather around. Just yesterday, I was in a session Miss Alicia Wise was chairing, and there was a librarian from the University of California, UC Davis, had said that 40% of their archive is lost. And she estimated that that goes across the entire California digital system. So not only do we have this issue, of course, in Africa, which is very serious, but we have this issue right here in the U.S. for that. And it's really shocking. So here, you know, we have Miss Inad from the Virtual Library, Kentucky Virtual Library. We have Miss Nettie Legassi from NISO. And we're all talking about, you know, standards. And the question is, the challenge for us as an industry is, how do we coalesce? How do we truly collaborate so that we're doing this as efficiently and as effectively as possible? So I'd like to get Ms. Nettie Legacy's thoughts on that. And feel free to step up to the mic.
Yeah, it's sort of. Where to start? That's kind of a big question, Daryl. I think that what we do at NISO is trying to take off bite-sized pieces, and working groups are made up of, as I said, of volunteers who have day jobs and their own work and home priorities. And something that I think about all the time is the scope. So you can't take a huge scope and think we're going to solve everything in one project. So for NISO projects anyway, we try to take off areas that can be dealt with, but then you also do have to have the vision, because you do want to connect all of these things together in the end. And that's why we need to have our conversations continuing at these kinds of conferences and meetings, so that we're all aware of all of the problems that everyone else has. So, and that kind of, starts light bulbs set off, and, starts the connections going. So.
If
Yes,
I
sir,
may.
please, absolutely.
I just want to make an observation in case I misspoke earlier. I'm hugely in favor of standards.
I wasn't taking.
I just wanted to make sure it's absolutely clear. Everything in this, the number of standards, the lights, the standards, standards we built. I just think you've got to go in stages. That's all.
And I also fully agree that the perfect is the enemy of the good. Everywhere, yes.
And so, now, Inad, thank you for traveling here to Charleston to present this wonderful presentation. What is the goal of the Kentucky Virtual Library? Is it just that you just want to work within Kentucky, or do you want to share what you have with not only the U.S. but the world?
Well, we're part of the Commonwealth, we're part of state government, so our borders are pretty hard, with content, but for us, the big thing is ease of access and equity, that everybody in the Commonwealth has the same resources. But as far as, our consortium will not grow because we're not allowed to.
Of course, of course, of course. But how does one get involved with you from an informational standpoint?
I'm sorry, you'll have to.
Okay, how does another consortia, state consortia, or other consortia get involved with you just on a professional informational basis?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
It's quite
We've been involved with ICOLC for many decades now. KYVL has been around since fall of '99. Our birthday was a couple days ago.
Happy birthday.
So we do interact with our colleagues around the country and work with other consortium. We're working on a project right now that is CC Plus and pulling in sushi data. We finally got a developer, so we worked with other consortia in the early parts of their grants and kind of tagged along. And then we've been able to take that internally and work with it and develop it for us. But hopefully, the end goal is documentation, packaging, and being able to share that out with other consortia, because stats when you're a multi-type, terrible. So yes, I mean, we're interconnected, yeah.
Okay. Well, to close out our session, I'd like to give our presenters 10 seconds to words of wisdom or a thought that you would like to leave with the group. And let's start with Nettie.
This is very silly, but it's almost the end. I'd say don't miss the biscuits and ice cream on King Street.
All right. Stephen?
Enemy of the good, perfect.
Ina?
Gosh, Easy Proxy self-hosted, good. Easy Proxy OCLC hosted for us was not a solution. So while there are more sophisticated ways to do authentication, we pay $800 a year for Easy Proxy self-hosted, and we're tiny and don't have a lot of money. So we're happy to share what we learned if anybody else has it or would consider implementing the solution in their own environment.
Thank you. I would just say that it's important for technical services to think beyond the typical paradigms of what you can provide and support all areas and users within your library, such as partnering with access services and public services. Lastly, I'd say technical services is a public service. Thank you.
And just one final thought, together we can do more. Thanks all.
Let's give our presenters a big round of applause. Thank you. And I want to thank you for being such a great audience. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the conference.